Right now, President Trump is in Egypt for a historic Middle East peace summit. Earlier today, he spoke to our Trey Yingst about how the deal between Israel and Hamas finally came together.
I think it really started when we took out the nuclear capability of Iran. When you look at what they had, you couldn't have made this deal if somebody's sitting over there with a nuclear weapon over your head. And I think when we did that, and there were other obviously very warlike things that we did over the course of 4 or 5 years, if you know, setting the table. But when we did when we took away that destructive capability from Iran.
Well, there you have it. Retired 4-star General Jack Keane joins us now. General, good to have you here. Is the war and fighting really over?
It potentially is over. We have a lot of challenge ahead. You know, President Trump is absolutely very accurate. I mean, what separated him from his predecessor, President Biden, when he took over, he knew instinctively what needed to be done here, that Israel had to achieve a victory over Iran and its proxies, that never again can we permit something like October the 7th to happen. And so he removed all the weapons restrictions that Biden had imposed on Israel. He told Prime Minister Netanyahu to go full throttle in Gaza. When he wanted to go in Lebanon and to take down Hezbollah, he supported it. And then he supported the attack on Iran. Those two things, Hezbollah attack and Iran attack, were both opposed by the Biden administration. They preferred appeasement with the Iranians. Trump saw instinctively that this was a major war that Israel had to win, and he had to support them in winning it. And when they did that, then the opportunity, Ashley, for peace has opened up. Even the last step, everybody opposed, to include even Prime Minister Netanyahu's military leaders, going back into Gaza City. What Netanyahu did, he moved 1 million people out over a 3-week period, surrounded Hamas, and was ready to squeeze them. And that's when President Trump looked at that and said, wow, what an opportunity we have now. Hamas is back on their heels for sure. Defeat is imminent. And that's when he moved to the Arab and Muslim, had that meeting in conjunction with the UN General Assembly meeting, brought them all together. And they recognized that this is not serving anybody's interest, even those who were pro-Hamas, like Turkey, somewhat Egypt, and somewhat Qataris. They split the difference, in other words. They're on both sides of this. They were in agreement. This thing has to end. So that has captured people in the region. And yeah, Ashley, you're right. I mean, there is a real opportunity here for peace, but we have to disarm Hamas. Yeah. And that still may be a challenge in doing it.
You mentioned Iran a lot, and the president says he thinks Tehran will eventually come along for a peace deal. Do you think that's true, and how do we get to that point?
I'm not as optimistic about it as the president is. I mean, he's looking at it rationally, likely through our prism more than anything else. Though the jig is up, so to speak, for Iran. They're never going to have the same, have the future that they had in the past. But the regime hasn't changed. And they are ideologically driven and completely committed to, at some point, restarted their nuclear program and at some point restarted their ballistic missile program. In other words, returning to the past in the future, despite the defeat that was handed them. That's where those guys are right now. We know that for a fact. So we got some work to do persuading them that they should be a responsible country in the region. My own judgment, I don't think that can happen with these thugs and killers and ideological fanatics in charge. Until they leave the scene and other people are in there, can we possibly work something? We'll see. I hope the president's right, that they are likely ready for something, but there are no signs, Ashley, that they are.
Let's move to Ukraine, Russia. Can any of this momentum be put towards that conflict, in your opinion, and how does that begin?
Yeah, I think you put your finger on something here. From the outset, Trump supporting Netanyahu, and particularly after the decisive blow that the United States rendered to Iran on the nuclear program, that got everybody's attention in China and certainly in Russia. And President Trump has gone slow with Putin, trying to bring him around, painstakingly so, frustrating many people around him and frustrating himself more than anything, because he had much better expectations that Putin would likely come to the negotiating table, but he's escalated the war.
Yeah.
I think Trump is at a place now where he's completely fed up with Putin. I know for a fact he's removed the restrictions on use of long-range weapons inside of Russia, and the Ukrainians are doing real damage to oil capabilities there. They've damaged at least 40% of their oil refineries, and he's upgunning Ukraine. He has yet to impose the tariffs and sanctions on people who are purchasing Russian oil other than the Indians. And that remains to be done. I think he's got it in his kit bag, and I think he's getting closer to it. He wants to work this thing, certainly in the Middle East, and try to push this along. But I think you're right. I think his attention is going to turn to Ukraine, and I think he's going to likely support Zelensky very strongly and start to put some economic pressure on Putin in addition to the military pressure.
Very good. We'll have to leave it there. So much to talk about, but General Jack Keane, as always, appreciate your input today on these very big issues, clearly. But thank you, General.